week's Citizens Climate Lobby Training Program, a weekly webinar of Citizens Climate Lobby that provides CCL supporters like you and I with access to in-depth training on topics related to climate change and effective climate advocacy. I'm your host, Brett Cease, and tonight's topic is strategies for attending candidate events. We're going to be joined by CCL's National Actions Director, Todd Elvins, to cover what CCL wants all candidates to move towards, and that is climate, to the top of their policy agenda this election season. So tonight, we're going to have the chance to review how to plan for lots of folks to attend campaign events this summer and prepare for the events by crafting effective questions to ask, as well as getting to know and educating candidates about CCL, the work we're up to, whether they're doing campaign events or not. We're going to be joined by Todd Elvins on this training to walk through CCL's main goals heading into this election season, picking up steam, and how each of us can engage with candidates in our own neck of the woods and have the chance to get to know our members of Congress and emphasize the importance of climate as a priority issue ahead of this election. Beginning in 1988, a little bit more about my co-presenter here tonight, Todd Elvins spent 10 years teaming with Earth, Ocean, and space scientists at the University of California, San Diego Supercomputer Center. He then spent 15 years managing software development at technology businesses, including Oracle. Todd has been a volunteer with CCL for the last 12 years and joined staff 7 years ago. He holds a doctorate in engineering from UC San Diego and stays resilient by surfing in the mornings with the Dawn Patrol. And if we've done our job well here, our following learning goals tonight are going to help you learn how to find candidate events and locate those, as well as find out more information about the candidates and the members of Congress in your district. We're going to provide some guidelines for crafting questions to ask at candidate events, and we'll have the chance to review some of the recommendations that we recommend in terms of what to do with forming your questions, as well as the do's and the don'ts and what to engage in and what to avoid at these outcomes. So with our agenda, we'll start talking a little bit more about what candidate events are, describing a lot of the opportunities available in your district, how you can learn more about the candidates in your neck of the woods, how you can start developing some real key strategic questions, and then we'll dive into a little Q&A if anyone asks questions, and then we'll have the chance to talk a little bit more about how we work with incumbents, especially since that is the majority of the House and the Senate every year, people running for re-election, and then have the chance to close with reminding how each of us stays nonpartisan or bipartisan in the work and outreach that we're doing. Without further ado, though, thank you all so much for being here, and I will pass it to you, Todd.
Thank you, Brett. It is so great to see you all. I'm glad that you could join. I'm going to start off by saying that there are a number of ways to find and participate in candidate events, and we're going to talk about the most important ones. Let's first look at the types of candidate events to search for, and then we'll discuss how to find them. So I have a lot to say about this slide, so stand by. There are at least 6 types of candidate events that you and your chapter might attend. The first one is in-person general town hall, where a member of Congress or a candidate stands before an in-person audience and answers questions on a wide variety of topics, as opposed to the second type, which is an in-person topic-specific town hall. And in these are becoming more common as a means to engage constituents directly on a specific issue facing the community, avoiding other topics that the speaker may not want to discuss. These events provide you an opportunity to engage on a specific issue the member of Congress is passionate about, as well as demonstrate the relationship between that issue and climate change. The third type of event is a candidate forum. These occur frequently close to elections, which we are, and give you a chance to engage candidates on a specific topic. You can also contact the local nonprofit that's hosting these, often the League of Women Voters, and you can use that to create new or strengthen existing relationships with the nonprofit hosting organization. The fourth type is a campaign town hall. These might be in person or on the phone or on Zoom. And these events, number one, allow a candidate to engage with voters. And two, they enable voters to ask politically focused questions that cannot be asked during a typical town hall event. And the fifth type is a teletown hall. These are the most common type of town hall. And in these town halls occur over the phone with anywhere from a few hundred or even thousands of constituents on the line. The individuals chosen to attend usually do not receive much notice and are automatically dialed and connected to a live phone call where a member of Congress or another candidate takes questions from callers after the question's been screened by a staff member. And then finally, there are Facebook Live events, and these are hosted on Facebook and provide an opportunity for those watching to post questions to the candidates right there on the live Facebook event. And I also want to be sure to mention here that it's a good idea to encourage lots of your fellow chapter volunteers to attend each event. Try to have volunteers at all the candidate events if you can, because the more volunteers you have, the better chance there's going to be lots of questions on climate change. All right, so many members of Congress and candidates in general include a specific form or a link on their webpage for constituents to sign up to participate or be on the list for future events. If their website doesn't have a form like that, it's worth calling the office to see if they keep such a list and if your name and information can be added. Whether candidate offices keep a specific list of individuals eager to participate in town hall events or not, be sure that the office has your correct contact information, including your full name, your address, and your phone number. And be sure to use a phone number that you can be reached at during weekday evenings, as this is when most teletown hall events take place. And be sure to sign up on all candidate websites for their newsletter if you haven't done that already. Offices often send information on upcoming in-person town hall events through their newsletter subscriber list if they're trying to increase attendance. And these lists are also used to formulate teletown hall audiences, particularly leading up to an election. Also check the candidates' Facebook pages and other social media pages to find out when a public event is happening. For members of Congress running for re-election, you can stay in contact with the district scheduler to learn about events. And for all candidates, including returning members of Congress running for re-election and other candidates, be sure to stay in contact with the local campaign office. Sometimes there isn't much advance notice. As I said, these teletown halls, they sometimes get scheduled really quickly. So you may need to check in frequently with the campaign office. All right, so now let's focus on how to do your research on all candidates to learn about their policy positions and other details. So you're going to need to know a candidate's policy position when you start drafting questions. And we're going to talk in a minute about strategically drafting questions, making them very carefully worded. So start your research on all the candidates by visiting candidate websites and subscribing to candidate newsletters. Make notes on the candidate's position on climate, their personal stories, their biggest issues, their major supporters, their donors, and who they are trying to appeal to as they campaign. Also check the candidate's social media, as I said, and sign up for their press release distribution to stay informed on their priorities and their upcoming events. You can also use this research as a grasstops opportunity when you discover people in your research who are trusted messengers to the candidate. Because recall, we asked all volunteers going to DC to lobby meetings to bring with them a letter from a trusted messenger to the lobby meeting. And I've just been looking at the numbers, and the numbers are pretty good for people who did that. All right, so plan to approach candidate events with the same diligence you would apply to a private meeting with a member of Congress. What are the concerns of the member of Congress and their constituents? What kind of language and messaging will resonate with the audience in your district? A good strategic question includes an appreciation at the beginning and the end and offers some useful talking points for the speaker to pick up on. It may be tempting to try to embarrass some candidates, but this will be less productive than helping them find talking points that lead to solutions. The ideal question encourages the candidate to respond positively and plays well with the audience. In general, we want to ask questions that encourage them to speak about solutions and the need for bipartisanship. All right, so let's talk about how to develop strategic questions. Start your questions with a very brief appreciation, as I said, and a bit of your personal story, very short. Then, since we want candidates, especially on the right, to know that the public and members of their party want action on climate, phrase your candidate question in the language of their party and make sure to appeal to and educate the audience. For example, you might talk about risk management when you're talking to conservative candidates. Start your question with the word what or how to make it open-ended and put it in the context of the local jurisdiction. Link the candidate's strengths to climate change and be sure that your question invites a positive response and encourages a commitment to strong climate legislation. You might not mention you're a CCLer to create the impression that you're just a plain old regular member of the public and the public cares about climate change. You can also mingle informally before or after the event to establish a rapport with the candidate or their staff. Arrive early, stay late, and develop a relationship with the candidate. All right, here are some questions to avoid at any type of candidate event. And I'm going to just blast through these really quick because you can just read them right off the slide. Avoid speeches disguised as questions. Keep it brief and focused on one aspect. Avoid questions that make them say no. We talked about that. Avoid accusatory questions, anything that starts with, why didn't you? Or I was disappointed that. Don't do that. We want to lead them to a better position, and we want, we're unlikely to reach their hearts with negative questions. Avoid prefacing questions with long statements about the desperate situation with the climate. When including information on climate change, reference local experts and specific local climate impacts in their jurisdiction if they're a member of Congress, or their jurisdiction if they're a candidate running for Congress. Although these meetings can offer opportunities to move things forward, sometimes meetings are counterproductive. Avoid saying something that provokes a negative response from the crowd because this could discourage a candidate from taking leadership on climate change. Avoid backing the candidate into a corner and creating a defensive reaction. Our goal is engagement, not confrontation. If that's not possible, then attending and speaking at these events may not be a useful strategy for you and your chapter. All right, now we're going to have an expert. Let's hear from our own congressional expert, CCL Senior Director Jen Tyler, on how to wordsmith your question and frame for different audiences.
So for the next section, we're going to review 3 different approaches to engaging your member of Congress with a question, and it's going to depend on the audience mix you find yourself in. We're going to talk about a politically mixed audience, a liberal audience, and then a conservative audience. So we'll start with the politically mixed audience. In these audiences, you can't assume that everyone is on board with climate action. Some people are going to be where we are and some people aren't. So the goal here is to make it very personal and make it very local. You want to make sure that you're talking about something that's going to resonate with a lot of people in the room. So talking, like I said, about the local flooding, talking about a recent incident that happened near your house or local impact on businesses that you've heard from business owners, something that's going to touch the hearts of everyone in the room. And then you also want to highlight the economic impacts. And we say this because that's one of the topics that resonates with most people. It goes beyond health impacts. It touches more people than a lot of other tangential impacts of climate, economic policy, economic impacts, how it's hitting their paychecks, how it's hitting their weekly spending. Those topics go a long way in the eyes of most people, especially in mixed audiences.
Last year, my cousin almost lost her job because she couldn't get to work after the roads washed out in her town following 10 inches of rainfall. That's supposed to be a 1,000-year event, but we've had several in the last few years. I think there's something to this problem of climate change. I'm tired of seeing Congress argue over it. I'd like to see both parties come together and do something. How will you bring members of both parties together to make sure that we aren't making things worse for my generation, kids, and grandkids by ignoring climate change?
So we're going to turn to a more liberal audience. So when you know most of the people in the room are of a liberal bent, you can assume that most attendees are already prioritizing climate policy as one of their top issues, and the member of Congress as well. So when that's the audience, The most important things are to highlight the importance of bipartisan buy-in. And for that point, you want to make sure that we're highlighting that, partisan solutions are not going to stand the test of time. If you've got a changing administration, a changing Congress, policies that are supported only by one party are very easily rolled back. So that's why we're pushing for these bipartisan solutions that are going to last. They're going to stand the test of time and really be able to be something that's making long-term significant change. And the last thing you might want to do is highlight our desired policy, so in this case, carbon pricing, while drawing out the members' positions. So given that you know that everyone's on board with climate action, the need for significant action, it's helpful to dive into here's our policy, but also see where's the member stand on that and what other policies are they looking at that they might want to put forward on climate.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I would guess that most people here are concerned, like I am, about climate change. And we're doing as much as we can locally and individually to lower our own emissions, but we need federal action. I've personally concluded that the only way that can happen is by both parties working together. Otherwise, everything gets undone with a change in administration. What will you do to work with Republicans who are beginning to come around on this issue so that we can have some lasting solutions?
Perfect. So the last one we're going to talk about is when the audience is conservative. So in this case, you're going to assume that some people in the audience, maybe the majority, unfortunately, are skeptical of climate change science. They're skeptical of the policies that are being proposed in the space. So in this case, your goal is to focus on local environmental issues that impact everyone and most importantly are impacting the economy. So like I said before, maybe it's an issue that's facing the ag community. Maybe it's an issue that's impacting some of the infrastructure and preventing some of our goods from being transferred across county lines or some sort of local business issue. Any of those issues are going to resonate with people in the room. It's not going to immediately send off red flags as an environmentalist is asking a question. It's going to be about an issue that they care about, an issue that's impacting their daily life. And the second part of it is to highlight the importance of conservative, market-based environmental policy solutions. You want to make sure that the member and the audience feel like we're talking to them on their terms. The words conservative, market-based, those are terms that they're going to feel very comfortable with and things that are going to signal to them, oh, there is a place for us in this dialogue. What can I bring to the table? That's something that I support, that my constituent supports, and that I'm ready to talk on more fully. So those are the two key things to highlight on.
The wildfire season has already started again out west here, and I see last year my friends in Idaho were telling me about all the smoke and ash falling in their neighborhoods. I worry about their health, their homes, and I also wonder how much fighting these fires is costing us as taxpayers. I think we need to take prudent action about climate change. What kinds of solutions would be consistent with conservative values on this important topic? These are great ways to frame how you can get more engaged in your own planning. And if you are wanting to find out more about just like a whole swath of the actual town hall questions available, we have both a planning guide as well as a bank of questions that I'll put a link to in the chat. And these are example questions that you're more than welcome to tap into with your team, be able to really find out more on what you're looking for and have the chance to really dive into, having more of this mapped out ahead of time so that you do feel more comfortable and confident when the opportunity presents itself. Let's change gears, though, a little bit and talk about how we actually work with our existing members of Congress. They may or may not actually be running for re-election, and all current members of Congress will continue to vote on legislation until the very last day that they have in their own kind of service, or intend to until the end of the year, kind of that lame duck period, proverbially speaking. Again, keeping in mind, even if your member of Congress is retiring or if they do happen to lose their re-election this fall, they still will be a very prominent member of your community after that. So what are some of the things to keep in mind on that front? Number one, you want to continue working with your incumbent as you have been, even though they're retiring, to continue to increase their support for climate action to a level of ambition that really aligns with our shared goal, akin to the Paris Agreement that the U.S. is a signatory to, a 50% reduction in emissions below 2005 levels by 2030. Believe it or not, that's 6 years from now. So let's make that happen. Despite the considerable distraction of elections, they still represent you. They vote on legislation through the end of the year and even during the lame duck period after that election season, like I've talked about. The important thing also that we've highlighted throughout this year is they need to keep hearing from constituents, especially new voices, bringing in and broadening your banner of voices that you're featuring from your community is absolutely key, from different demographics, from different backgrounds, from different stakeholder groups throughout the district. Regardless of your member's stance on specific climate policy, we need them to hear from their constituents that climate action remains a top priority now and throughout the remainder of this Congress. Do some research to identify who in your community your member trusts. And as we've highlighted in other changes, make sure to bring those voices to your discussion. So some additional resources that I've already kind of hinted at to really get at these recommendations. I've put in the chat the resource on how you can develop questions to ask in your town hall example question guide, as well as a planning guide to coordinate who in your chapter can take on those responsibilities. We also have an excellent Communicating with Conservatives core volunteer training. You can find that link in the chat as well, or just search in community for that topic. And our amazing campaign season activities training includes a project management worksheet for leveraging town halls. Finally, the big thing that we also want to highlight, I just clicked on that link so you can kind of see what that looks like. But the big thing that we do want to highlight here, if I can just reshare my screen, is the importance of thinking about how we can stay bipartisan and nonpartisan with our actual election activities for the remainder of the election season ahead. So I'm going to tee us up to thinking about a couple of things, then I'll pass to you, Todd, to kind of close us out with the final reminders for this evening. Number one, whatever you choose to do during election season, remember always that CCL is both nonpartisan, meaning that we don't engage in partisan politics or endorse candidates, as well as bipartisan. And that means that we work with people from both of the major parties. If your current member of Congress asks to speak at one of your meetings, you're welcome to have them attend. Although you should be really clear that you discourage explicit campaigning, and you should also find a way to invite anyone else that might be running from the other major party, or really anyone in the actual kind of House or Senate race, to also speak. If one candidate is invited to speak, like I've highlighted, make sure to continue to engage and be even-handed towards all candidates. If you have any questions about what events to attend or what your ask should be with any of the candidates, feel free to reach out to your regional director or any of us here on staff. We're happy to think through and support you in kind of that discussion point. But beyond that, Todd, what are some of the other activities that we should consider avoiding?
Right. So we're going to be in campaign season for another few months, and I want to just go ahead and mention some activities that chapters should avoid during that time. CCL chapters should not endorse any candidates or participate in partisan campaign activities or events. CCL chapter meetings should not be used to spread campaign material or advocate for candidates or provide a platform for a candidate to speak. If one candidate is invited to come to a chapter meeting, then they should all be invited to the chapter meeting. Make it a candidate party. CCL chapters should also avoid attacking candidates. That candidate may become your future member of Congress, and they're likely to remain community leaders, and it's not consistent with our core values and CCL's policy of respect and appreciation. So here's a question that comes up sometimes. It's not something that comes up all the time, but I did want to be sure to cover it. What if a volunteer in your chapter runs for office? So we have a section on a training page on community where you can find all the details on how to handle that situation. I'm not going to go over that here because it doesn't come up that often, but I just want everyone to know that there is information on what to do in that situation on community, and there's a link to it. It's on the campaign season activities training page. And of course, if that happens, you should also be in contact with your state coordinator, your regional director, or CCL staff with any questions you might have in that situation. And finally, whenever you attend a candidate event or have any contact with a candidate, be sure to log it in the action tracker under Gratz Top's meeting with community leader. However, there's an exception. If that candidate is a current sitting member of Congress, log it under contact with legislator. So there's two different ways to log any contact with a candidate. And I just wanted to be sure that you're clear on that. So when you get to the action tracker, you're going to immediately go, oh, what do I click on?
As always, we love having credit for any of the trainings that you're attending, whether it's live or asynchronously on your own time online. You can also just log that directly through the action tracker, as well as seeing at the bottom of any of the training pages with that green button or that little log your training if it's an interactive piece. And the other thing I just wanted to highlight, outside of always reminding you to save your chat, and that this training will be live and posted on our YouTube and our CCL community page by tomorrow, as it always is, the day after our CCL training program. But if you'd like to get in touch with Todd or I after tonight, our contact information is listed here. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration. Like what you hear? Recommend us to your friends and make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us show up on other listeners' feeds. Feel free to pass on any suggestions for future episodes in the comments as well. And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.